Hey there, bold ones. Welcome to another episode of Act Bold. Today I have John Osborne Hughes. John is a veteran in the film industry. He wears many, many hats. He's an actor, a producer, a director, and most importantly for our conversation today, he's also the creator of the spiritual psychology of acting, which is a method to, well, we're going to get into exactly what it is and what's it about, but it definitely is there to enhance your performance. So without any further ado, let's let John do the explaining here. Hey, John, so good to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Anne. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you've got me very, very, very curious. Obviously, psychology, I can kind of figure out what that might have to do with acting. But explain to me, first of all, what the spiritual psychology of acting means to you, how it came about, and what it is. And you can take those in any order that works for you.
Okay. Well, I began my training in London at the Academy of Live and Recorded Art. And now it doesn't exist anymore, but it was a fantastic drama school back in the day. And I met one of my tutors there was a man called Sam Kogan. He was a Ukrainian director, acting teacher who'd he trained with the Moscow Institute of Theatre Art.
Oh, wow.
And when I left my actor training, I went on with him and did a 2-year directing training in association with the Moscow Institute of Theatre Arts, where I spent some time in Moscow and I learned the Stanislavsky system sort of directly from the Russians. And then when I
How long were you in
graduated,
Moscow for? I have to ask, how
oh,
long were you there
we
for?
were in and out, so we'd go for 2 weeks and then come back. So a lot of it
Oh,
was
okay.
seeing their productions and seeing how they worked, and they were absolutely fantastic actors. But when I began applying what I'd learned, a lot of it sort of didn't work or it was too cerebral. And I wondered if there was a spiritual aspect to the work, because I felt personally that something was missing in my own life. In terms of the Stanislavski system, it's great for getting into the character and creating a framework to get into that character. Stanislavski himself, well, the main premise of his system was that through conscious technique, we pave the way to subconscious creativity. So that conscious technique I've evolved into what I call active embodiment technique. So the spiritual psychology is a body of knowledge. It's a comprehensive body of knowledge of actor training, how to create a character with inspiration. Um, and the actual technical technique within that system is known as active embodiment. So really it began, I started teaching in New York in 1999. I was invited there by an American actress, Sarah Clark, who since has gone on to do some great things. She saw a production that I directed in the West End of a Mike Leigh play, and she really liked what she saw. She said, how do you do it? Because you couldn't see the actors, you could only see characters. She said, and I wasn't used to that. Usually you can see the actor performing, but there was no, they were just in the character. How do you achieve it? So I explained to her a bit about it. She said, okay, well, this is something I really need to explore. If I bring you to New York, can I do it for free? So it's fine. So she got a group of actors together, a wonderful group, and we did a weekend. And at the end of the weekend, they said, okay, we don't care how much this costs. We don't care how long it takes. We need to learn this whole system. How can you make it available? So that began some regular visits to New York to train that group. And then that led to another group, which led to another group, which led to another group. And this went on for 9 years. And then one day, a couple of years into it, I did an intro workshop and someone came up to me at the end of it and said, this is amazing. You know, this is way beyond what we've been learning here with sort of Lee Strasberg and the Meisner technique and all of those things that a lot of the New York actors were studying at that time. And she said, what is this? What do you call it? And the words just came out of my mouth. This is the spiritual psychology of acting. Which for me was quite surprising. You know, in my early 20s, I'd have probably considered myself an atheist. But I wondered, what is that? What is it that makes it that I can't take my eyes off Al Pacino when he's acting? What is that quality? What is that presence and charisma? And so that began some research into sort of various philosophical systems. And then I came into contact with a teaching which has its basis, really, it's the basis of the whole Hindu teaching. And the system of philosophy is called Advaita Vedanta. And Advaita means not two, and Vedanta means knowledge. So it's the knowledge of the not two, or in other words, the knowledge of the one consciousness which manifests itself as me, you, and this entire universe. And that included the practice of meditation, which I've been this year, it'll be 30 years since I've been practicing mantra-based meditation, which was having a tremendous effect in my own life. It was just opening things up and just giving me a lot of inspiration. So I began bringing some of the teachings I was learning as reflections at the beginning of the class actors. And the main principle is that I always say to students on the intro seminar, imagine that we're all lampshades. Everybody you meet is a lampshade, and they're all unique. They all have a different pattern. And if I were to put a little 15-watt bulb behind that lampshade, it would illuminate the pattern and we'd see it to a certain degree. The colors would shine out. But if we put a 250-watt bulb behind the same lampshade, the colors would be much more bright, much more vivid. The light would fill the room or the stage or the screen, if you can see where I'm going with this. And so basically I explained to them that the psychology of acting is the means by which so that they shine more brilliantly on stage. And this is the X factor. This is, stage presence.
Sorry for the interruption, but hey, look, we got to talk follow-up for a sec. You meet that casting director, agent, or awesome collaborator. You have a great chat. You send your materials, and then crickets. Sound familiar? Listen, if the thought of follow-up makes you feel awkward or spammy or just completely stumped on what even to say, you are definitely not alone. So many talented actors I know let amazing connections fizzle out simply because they don't have a solid, authentic follow-up game plan. They're stuck. Here's the thing. Following up isn't about being annoying. It's about building real relationships. It's about staying top of mind in a way that feels genuine, not desperate. You know what I mean? And because I know that this is a huge sticking point for so many actors, I'm hosting something special just for you. It's my free 5-day live follow-up challenge. It's called Follow Up or Fade Out. Yep, totally free. And we do it live together over 5 days. I'm going to give you super simple, actionable steps, a clear system to take the guesswork and the cringe out of following up. We'll cover what to say, when to say it, and how to do it authentically. Plus, because it's live, you can ask me your specific questions in real time and get unstuck right then and there. So no more wondering alone. So stop letting those connections go cold. If you want to finally nail your follow-up strategy, build those crucial industry relationships, and get your questions answered directly by me, you need to be in this live challenge. So just head over to actbold.com/5-day-follow-up-challenge. I'm going to put that in the link below, don't worry. It'll take like 30 seconds for you to sign up. Seriously, grab your spot now while you're thinking about it. All right, now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Someone who has stage presence. Well, presence means that you have the power to bring others into the present. And what's the first precondition of bringing others into the present? Being present yourself. How do you connect with the present? Well, the mind goes to the past and the future. That's all mental pictures. That's sort of daydreaming, really. And the present moment is experienced through connecting with the senses. So first off, I give all students two sort of ongoing homeworks. One of them is to practice a simple meditation that I send them twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. And that just brings them home to themselves, which is, the source of all creativity is the sort of self within.
Right.
Um,
Maybe you would share that meditation. I could put a link to wherever your website
well,
and we
for
could
sure. Well, I was going to say, well, when people come to the intro seminar, so I do a monthly online free intro seminars, and when
Right.
people attend that, I always send them an MP3 of the meditation straight after, so they get a copy of that with the follow up information.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's a meditation that's evolved sort of during my time as a teacher,
Yeah.
which is 31 years now.
Yes.
And it's very powerful. It's a very simple way of connecting with the senses and connecting with stillness and silence and experiencing some peace and bliss. And what I
Okay.
find that if you bring the actors to that state before they start work, then it's like clears the slate. It clears their mind. The biggest obstacle to good acting is the actor's own patterns of thinking is what's getting in the
Right.
way. Their
Right.
own claims and attachments and their need to be liked or their need to be right or succeed or whatever their own sort of personal investment is. And what the meditation tends to do is get all that out of the way. So then we can start the real fun business of getting inside the character's psyche and creating the characters. And the byproduct of it is that it creates this kind of illumination in the actor and they shine. So that's really the spiritual part. The spiritual part is upping the wattage of the bulb. And the psychology of acting is how to create the lampshades.
Okay. That makes sense. I like it. Is it so when you say the embodiment, so active embodiment, would that be something similar to Laban or Christopher Fettes? Are you familiar with him?
I am familiar with all those works. No, yes, I am familiar with that. But no, sort of active embodiment is there's two aspects to active embodiment technique. The first is we call them mind triads. It's a sort of technical term, but it's how you create the character's general psychology. So the general psychology of their life. And obviously it has to relate to the function of the character in the play. So I teach
Right.
actors really that the first step is to understand what's the thesis of the play, what's the play saying, what's the message of the play, what's the message that the comment which the author wishes to make about the themes in the play. So the play could be about
Right.
love or power or redemption, and we call that the play or the film thesis. And then the next question is, what's the function of my character?
Mm-hmm.
Within that to deliver that thesis, what's the function of the character?
Yeah.
And then once establishing that, we find out, well, what are the qualities we need to embody in order to fulfill that function?
Yes.
Now we're creating characters that actually serve the play, so every decision you're making for the character, Stanislavsky said, nothing for its own sake. So every choice we make as actors has to serve the play itself, right? That's how you keep it neat and,
Right.
and
Right.
logical.
Now you keep using play as an example, but I also heard you mention film. So this
Yeah.
same technique would also apply to film.
Exactly the same. It's exactly the same technique. It's the art and craft of character creation, really,
Okay.
or the
It's so
science and art of
interesting.
character creation.
Yeah. So I love it because obviously you're thinking you can see how your experience as a director would have fed into this because that's the director's job to understand the themes and to understand how each person represents. Are you for it, against it? Are you
Well,
helping it?
apparently so, but from the report I get, and I've trained a lot of professional actors, they tell me the directors just don't do that. It's very rare they find a director that does that. And mostly
Yeah,
in
I
TV and
agree.
film, the
I agree.
director's biggest
Yeah.
concern is getting the shots and the coverage and the lighting right. More than the performance. So really what I offer within the spiritual psychology of acting, the second half of the course is called the 10 steps to creating a character. And that I also call self-directing for actors. So
Okay.
given that generally the director isn't going to help you with this stuff, he's just employed you because he thinks you can come up with the result right from the audition. Um, so the 10 steps, which is how to create the character, the systematic process of how to do that. But the self-directing for actors is, of course, directing for directors. So I also train directors. I've got a course called the Art and Craft of Directing. And that I lead the students to developing usually their first short film. So from concept to screen, I sort of guide them through that process. But the fourth part of the fourth question is, so the first question is, what's the thesis? The second question is, what's my function? The third question is, what qualities do I need to embody in order to fulfill this function?
So can
And
we
then the
stop there
fourth,
for a sec?
go on.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Say the fourth one, and then
Well,
I
I was
want to
going
go
to say,
back
well,
to
the
the third
fourth
one.
one is what do I have to think in order to manifest these qualities to fulfill this function so that this character serves the thesis of the play? Because really in acting, there's three parts to acting. The first part is called analysis of the script. And what's that really? That's selecting the object of attention. In other words, finding out the question is, when I get up and say these lines, what thoughts am I going to have in my head? What are the thoughts behind these lines? We
Yeah.
could call this the subtext, what the character's really saying. And the active embodiment technique is a way of making choices, first of all, and then how to embody them. So in acting, it's, the first part is selecting the object of attention. That's analysis. The second part is programming, which means that making those objects of attention go from being visible, voluntary object of attention of the actor, which you've chosen, you've consciously chosen what the
So
character's psyche is
we're
going to
getting kind of
be.
esoteric. Can you give me an example?
It's very simple. Is how do you first of all select the character's thoughts, that you analyze the play,
Right.
commonly known as analyzing the play. I've got a
Right.
system of how we break the play down into episodes, manageable, rehearsable chunks.
Right.
People sometimes call these beats, which is
Right.
a misinterpretation of Stanislavsky. Stanislavsky would say, "No, we are going to break the play into beats," and he was saying bits.
Oh,
But in
that's
his
funny.
Russian accent, they
Yeah.
thought he was
Yeah.
saying beats.
Beats.
So it's
Well,
quite
beats
funny when you go
works.
to America
A
now, they'll
rose by
say,
any other name, right? I mean, it works. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so the second part is how to turn it from voluntary objects of attention of the actor into the involuntary objects of attention of the character, because most of our thinking in life is involuntary and unaware. It just happens, doesn't it?
Right.
What's that called? That's called rehearsal.
Right.
Frequent repetitive thinking. That's how you turn it
Right.
from voluntary involuntary. And then the third part of acting is the performance. And
Right.
between part 2 and 3, there's what I call the melting point. And the melting point is where the complexes that you've created for the character, these thoughts, complex means combined thought, how you bring them together. So you need a couple of runs at the show for the complexes to form. And that's usually when you have the previews. And then we're ready to go. So that's really the process in very simple terms: analysis,
Okay.
rehearsal, performance.
Okay. So again, tell me the 4 points.
Well, the 4 questions are, what's the function of the character? Sorry, the first one is, what's the thesis of the play? So what's the comment which
That
the
the
author is
Right.
making about the theme? For
Okay.
example, I'm working with a group at the moment, or I'm teaching an active embodiment course online, and we're looking at the play Dangerous Liaison.
Yeah.
And in there, the thesis of the play is that vanity destroys love. And that's the whole
Okay.
play in a nutshell. That's what the thesis of the play is. Vanity destroys love. And there's 2 themes there. There's love and vanity. Do you see what I mean? They're 2 threads
Yes.
that
Yeah.
run through the play. And
Yeah.
then, so the character, say, of Valmont, he's the sort of main character. He's the one that Malkovich played in the film.
Yes. Yeah.
We want a character who's obviously very vain, but he has some issues with love, and we have to find out, why is this character, why does he just want to seduce everybody? And so why doesn't he want to have a meaningful relationship? Why is he playing these dangerous liaisons? And what we found is that the character is a lovesick fool. So in his sort of developmental years, he's fallen madly in. We've invented this to truthify the character. He's fallen madly in love with this girl and made a fool of himself. And he's been humiliated. He's fallen in love with an older girl, and because of that shame, he then wants who can't be suspected of being a lovesick fool. And this is how the psyche works, usually in terms of opposites. To create a
Right.
character is to create a duality between the character's self-image, which is a lovesick fool, and his purpose, which is I want to be held in awe in order to be powerful.
Right.
Right?
How
We
he
call that
perceives himself versus how he would like to be perceived.
exactly. It's
Yes.
really
Yeah.
what do we call that? We call that the character's self-image.
Yeah.
That's the most important question we asked about the character is who does this character think they are?
Yeah.
And I teach that really what
This
is
is interestingly the most important question an actor can ask themselves about themselves.
well, exactly, or anyone can ask about themselves.
Yeah.
Exactly
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
who do
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I am? Because who
And
you
how would I like to be perceived?
right.
Who do I think I am? And how would I like to be perceived? And how closely do those things align?
Yeah, but really, for actors, we want to be free of the self-images. So at the beginning of the training of the spiritual psychology of acting, there's a lot of self-reflection. There's a lot of, I say that to all the actors that do my course, you are a walking laboratory for what it is to be a human character. So
Yeah.
all the properties of the course are within you because
Yeah.
all the spiritual psychology of acting is all I've done is taken the laws of nature. I've just found out what are the psychological laws by which nature created our characters in life. And that's become our acting technique. So there's nothing artificial. We're using the organic laws of nature. So there's
Yeah.
no substitution and these kind of tricks that you
I
get
was
in
going to ask you
Meisner
about
and
that.
Strasbourg.
I think it was your third point. So the first point is the themes of the author, the themes of the playwright or the screenwriter. The second one is how does my character fit into these themes? What is my purpose within these themes?
Function.
Function. What is
Function of
my
the character,
function
we call that.
within
Yeah.
these themes?
Yeah.
The third one was
What are the
was it?
qualities I need to embody?
What are the qualities I need to embody? And the fourth one was how do I embody these
Well, what do I
qualities?
need to think, really?
What do I need to think?
Exactly. So it's your thinking, it's the psychology. Now, what does that mean? What do I need to think? What's my purpose? What's my objective? What's my psychological action or psychological actions? What's my self-image? What's the event that the character's under? So it's a way of organizing that to create the character's psyche. So the first part of active embodiment is how to create the character's general psyche. So for Valmont, for example, right, it has what we call a mind triad, right? So it's made of a super image, which is always a self-image, meaning a relationship with themselves, a super OP, which stands for objective purpose, and a germ, which I'll come on to in a moment, a germ. So for Valmont, so to give an example, I'm a lovesick fool. And because I'm a lovesick fool, who can't be suspected of being a lovesick fool? Someone who wants to be held in awe, so put on a pedestal, and therefore be powerful, right? Because he was humiliated and that he was disempowered. He wants to empower himself. So he wants to be able to reject women. Does that mean he's got a Casanova complex? He wants to
Right.
reject women because
A bit of a narcissist.
a total narcissist.
Yeah,
The character
exactly.
is a
Yeah,
total
yeah.
narcissist. And then so his objective purpose is to be held in awe, to be powerful. And then the germ, which we get from Nemirinovich Danchenko, he was Stanislavsky's partner in crime. He said, what we need is something to hold the character together. And they came up with this idea of what they called a germ, not as in Domestos kills all known germs, as in wheat germ, the essence of the character. So the germ is the essence. And it's also the character's super action. because it informs how you move and speak, the inner rhythms and the vibrationary frequency of the character and how they move and talk. So, for example, the character of Valmont, his germ is a sexy vampire.
Mm.
So when he holds this image of being a sexy vampire, it's like there now he's starting to become Valmont. Do you see what I mean? Now what does that mean? He's a vampire. He sucks on people's blood, right? And it will also affect how, if you're imagining you've got fangs, it will affect your mouth and how you speak and how you sound.
Oh, interesting.
Do you see what I mean? So it starts to
Yeah.
inform everything, and that you've
Yeah.
got these really late cuff.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And there's something a little bit sort of dandy about this. I mean, it's set in sort of pre-revolutionary
absolutely.
France.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that informs how the character moves and speaks and sounds. So it would be, because you're building the layers of the character's psyche, what's in his subconscious, in his invisible thinking, this really trauma of having been a lovesick fool and being humiliated. So that's how we truthify the character. That's a really important word. How do we make it truthful? And then because of that, the antidote to that, it's the character's purpose and objective, what he wants out of life, in this case, to be held in order to be powerful. And then the germ is really, I say that there's a little equation, that's that the super image plus the OP equals the germ. Does that make sense?
Super image plus, so his super image of being this all-powerful seducer,
No, the
Casanova.
super image is being a lovesick fool.
Ah, okay. So the
So a
super image is
lovesick
how he
fool,
actually.
exactly, in order. So the psyche works in such a way that whatever is in the self-image, is the character's purpose tends to be the opposite.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So there's
For
another
sure.
play I work on, Killer Joe. And to give you another example, that the character of Killer Joe, I use that as a model in the class as well. It's a fantastic play by Tracy Lett. And the character there of Killer Joe, he has the self-image, he's the dirty son of a whore. So the character himself is a serial killer. He's a hitman who sort of carries out jobs, but his main job is as a detective. He works for the Dallas Police Department in the homicide, and he sometimes gets to investigate murders that he himself has committed. So we have to truthify all this. There's a scene in the play where one of the characters says, "Your eyes hurt." So he's got pain in his eyes. So, and there's another part where she says to him, "Are you married?" And he says, "Maybe." And she says, "What does that mean?" He says, "It means no." And she says, "Why not?" And he says, without a breath, "Because women are deceitful and lying and manipulative and vituperative and black-hearted and evil and old." We're like, okay, right. So that's his woman image, right? That's his woman image.
No subtext in that one.
No, it's in there. Well, that's good writing. It's in the play for you. It's his woman image.
Yeah.
So really, that's where do we form our woman image? It's generally through our relationship with our mother.
Yeah.
So what was going on with his mother? How can we create a serial killer, essentially? And it's like, well, he was the dirty son of a whore. He saw things, she was a prostitute. He saw things that he shouldn't as a child, and it damaged him. So he developed a sort of a hatred of men because he saw them there, going to see prostitutes.
Right.
And of course, a hatred of women because of that. And that's why he does what he does. So the character is, because I'm a dirty son of a whore, that's the self-image, I want to be powerful to take revenge. Right? That's what makes him a psychopath. Right? That's what psychopaths want. They want to be powerful and take revenge. And then the germ for that character, and it's set in a trailer park in early 90s Texas. And the germ for the character we chose is a sheriff. And a sheriff is a cowboy with a badge, right? So you start getting into active imagination of being a cowboy. You've got the hat, you've got the neck scarf, you've got the waistcoat, the leather waistcoat. Most importantly, you've got the gun, and you've got the boot. And in the play, it says he wears snakeskin boots, cowboy boots.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, if you
Yeah,
start imagining that and you start walking around the room,
there's a
it's gonna
swagger there.
change how you
Yeah,
move, the
absolutely.
swagger.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the first part of the active embodiment system. That's how to create the character's general psychology. But then step 8 of the 10 steps of creating a character is called episodes and EPOA. Now that's where we create the character's immediate psychology in the scene of what's immediately going on. So that,
Okay.
in other words, the character's state of mind.
Right.
So, and that's made up of 4 units. It's called the EPOA, Event, Purpose, Objective, Action.
Okay.
Okay, this is quite
And
technical, isn't it?
no, 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 I'm getting it. But so this is more like the shirtless, mammoth school of thought that you don't need to go into your own emotions and memories. You need to live truthfully within the moment.
well, you need to create a character's memories. I mean, what is the character? What is a character? You know, if you ask psychology, really, what is a character? It's a collection of experiences. You know, so all of Anne's experiences collectively, that's Anne's mind, and that's the character. There's no thoughts. There's no loose thoughts in our minds. Every thought we have is part of a larger group of thought,
Yeah.
which we call a complex. So what is a character really? It's a complex of thought. It's a complex of past experiences. Now, how are those experiences stored in our mind? As mental pictures and impressions. So to create the character means to create a collection of mental pictures and impressions from the past of the character's life. And
Mhm.
that's where I'm something of a purist. That's why I don't go into the whole Meisner-Strasberg substitution thing,
Right. Yeah.
because, you know,
Which is also comes from Stanislavsky
well,
too.
these are all kind of side roads that came from
Okay.
Stanislavski's
Yeah.
system. The Moscow Institute of Theatre Arts and the Moscow Arts Theatre went on tour in America, and of course, a lot of them didn't want to go home after the tour, so they began teaching acting bits from they were learning from their teacher Stanislavski. Then, of course, in a classic case of Chinese whispers, we get some of the teachings that we have today. But really,
Yeah.
Stanislavski himself started with a book on yoga. It was his initial inspiration was a book on Hatha Yoga,
Okay.
Hatha, Hatha Yoga. It means postures and breathing. And that was his initial inspiration. But of course, Stanislavski at the time didn't have access to the fine knowledge of the Himalayas and contemporary psychology that I've been lucky enough to have access to.
Yeah.
Um, so with the spiritual psychology of acting, I feel that the work of Stanislavski has gone full circle. He said himself when he died that we've made deep inroads into creating a systematic process for actors, but we're not there yet. And of course, Stanislavski kept on changing his mind throughout his life, which was somewhat confusing. If you read the transcript of his rehearsals with the actors who'd been trained by him, even they didn't quite understand what he was talking about. So what chance we've got in translated from Russian, when even in the Russian it doesn't fully make sense, is that we have little chance. So really the spiritual psychology of acting brings the Stanislavski system to a conclusion because it fully embodies the spiritual part. And the spiritual part is really helping the actor to raise their own level of consciousness. I mean, the purpose of theatre and cinematic art, as far as I've understood, the higher purposes are to raise the level of consciousness in the audience. So you
Yeah.
take them on a journey, usually from some sort of ignorance to some sort of enlightenment. You take the character on that journey, and thereby you take the audience on that journey. So there's a transformation that takes place in a great play. The second purpose of theatre and cinematic art is to open the heart. It's to, I put it like this, to open the hearts of those who've forgotten to open their own. So, you know, frostiness tends to gather around the human heart. So we need to find a means of freeing ourselves from that past frostiness to
Yeah.
open our own hearts. And then thirdly, the third purpose of cinematic and theatre art is, as Shakespeare so beautifully put it, to hold a mirror up to nature. So to
Mm.
reflect back the audience how they really live, you
Yeah.
know, so they can see for themselves. Now, the question then arises, it's like, well, how can an actor, writer, producer, director be involved in that process if they haven't, first of all, raised their own level of consciousness, open their own heart, and found out for themselves, how do we really live? What is a character really made of? And like I say, we're all walking laboratories on what it is to be a human character. So the first character they learn to analyze is their own, which is amazing because, the biggest obstacle to good acting, first of all, a lack of knowledge. There's a lot of talked about acting. There's a lot of sort of opinions of sort of acting teachers, etc. But we wanted to find out, what are the real laws of acting? So you could always use these laws. Every character you get, you can apply this system, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah, it sounds like so there's a lot of sort of assimilating of the method, but once you've assimilated that, then it becomes sort of second nature and you can just employ
exactly.
it. Or is there
Well,
sort of a checklist that you need to follow with
well,
every?
I can tell you that a big question is, what is talent? What is
Yeah.
talent? And
Yeah.
talent, in a general sense, seems to be very simply just the ability to ask yourself questions. As an actor, the more questions you ask about the character, when you ask a question like, what did my character have for breakfast today? You get pictures. Or what's in my character's bedside drawer? It was an interesting one. Or what kind of car does my character drive? Or what was my character's first day at school like? Or what was my character's relationship with my mother like?
Yeah.
Etc. The more we ask these questions, the more mental pictures we create. And within the course, we're taught about the different modes of imagination and how to think in active imagination for the character. So that helps you create the pictures. But talent for an actor, we define as are you ready for this?
Yes.
It's the intensity of synthesizing characters' complexes, unadulterated by the actor's own ego.
Okay, say it again. The
Right. Okay.
intensity
So the
of
intensity,
synthesizing.
yes, the intensity of synthesizing the character's complexes.
Okay.
Right. So I don't normally bring this into the class until they've understood what all these things are. So
No, but I've got like an idea, but yeah, the intensity of synthesizing actors'
the character's
complexes, the
complexes. Yeah.
characters'
So
complexes.
what is the character is a complex within the actor's mind. So you've got like a box of thoughts called Hamlet, right? And within that is all the thoughts of Hamlet's life. And what is that really? It's a partition within the actor's own mind, in the same way as, you have a complex going on holiday, right? So
Right.
what do you notice whenever you go on holiday and you're packing your cases, you start remembering all the other holidays you've been on in the past, and you start talking in fact about, remember that time when we went to Mallorca? And in other words, there's a box of thinking called holidays, which usually stays dormant for 11 months of the year. And then in my case, it comes out in August and we go somewhere. And that box
Right.
is, there's holiday
Yeah.
John. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a whole
Yeah.
complex of thought.
Yeah.
So what is the character? It's a complex within the actor's mind. So talent is the intensity, which means the speed, quality, and precision, which you can select the character's objects of attention, make these choices, and then synthesize them, means bring them together. And I ask actors, how many times do you have to think a thought before it becomes programmed? And they'll go 10, 5,
I was going to say 50. I don't
50.
know.
And I
Yeah.
say, well, it all depends on how much unfinished thinking the actor has. Now, what do I mean
Oh,
by
so I've
unfinished
got a
thinking?
lot.
Well, doesn't everyone? The unfinished thinking is any pattern of thinking that stops you from achieving your potential, right? From being self-actualized. So, what are those patterns of thinking? Generally, they fall into two categories. One is egotistic purposes. So the actor themselves has a often invisible desire to be liked, admired, center of attention, famous, superior, respected, acknowledged by their peers, and all to be special. So all of these purposes in the actor's subconscious, they don't suddenly go away just because you're acting. In fact, they get activated, especially, if you've got a big TV job, here's your big chance to be admired. So these things get in the way. So we need to understand how they work, how the purposes work. And that's a big part of the training, is understanding our own purposes. And what's the other part of the unfinished thinking is self-rejection. So negative self-images.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm stupid. It's the things that usually formed in childhood, have their origins in
Right.
childhood. And that's why we go back to childhood to find out where these thoughts started in the actor's mind. And so through this process of developing awareness, the ability to watch our own thought, not only can we create more observations from observing in life, how, our own psyche and other people around us, that we can put as unique observations into our character, it also shows us the patterns of thinking that are getting in the way, like my own self-rejection, like my own need to be noticed or whatever. And through the course, we
But
get
wait,
to
can I
address
stop you
those
there for a
things.
sec, John? Getting in the
Sure.
way of what? Getting in the way of the finding the character super objectives,
Yeah,
or
the
getting it?
creative process. So,
Get
so you might have created the character, but then when you go on stage, in your subconscious, your own need to be special, or your own need to be liked or admired, will come up. And generally, how do you know this? Because it will create stage fright.
or that
Do-
voice,
Well,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Stage fright is
Yes.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
obstacles
Yeah.
to fulfilling your egotistic purposes. Do you see what I mean? You've got the part,
Yeah.
you think, oh, now I'm going to be admired, and now I'm going to, my mum's going to be proud of me. And so there's a lot at stake. And so then, the more attachment there is to the
Does that
purpose,
go
the more
back to
obstacles.
because they're future framing based on past experiences instead of living in the moment?
Exactly. And that's good that you mentioned that, because within the course, we look at the different types of human purpose, the natural purposes, the egotistic purposes, the egocentric purposes. And then there's a fourth category, which we call shadow purposes. And these are the unconscious drives to fail, to suffer, to have a lonely life, to be
Yeah.
rejected, to be in a constant state of wanting, which is really poverty. Do you see what I mean? And how does that get
Absolutely.
into our heads? Is, the actor comes out of drama school, they have their first audition, and they've got high expectation. And then, of course, very often they won't get the job. Only one person's going to get the job. And so they think that they failed,
Yeah.
and therefore I am a failure. And then this all goes into the subconscious. And then the agent, the casting director or the agent says, here's another audition. And the actor's sitting on the bus on the way to the audition. Now, where's he getting the data from to create his pictures of the audition? From past experience. And what happened apparently in past experience was I failed. So now, if I'm unaware, I start seeing pictures of failing. We call this wanting to fail.
Hmm.
Do you see what I mean? We're programming
Absolutely. Yeah.
failure. So
Yeah.
when we begin to develop, one of
So
the
what can
biggest.
you do? Can you give us a tip for what you can do to stop that immediately?
Absolutely, yes. Well, first of all, we need to develop awareness, right? The most
Yes.
important quality of an actor, awareness,
Is
is the
aware.
ability to watch our own thought. So
Okay.
rather than just being a slave to our subconscious, which we laid down in childhood, we learn to see our patterns of thinking, right? Let's take some observation to do this, and to map it
Absolutely.
out.
Yeah.
And then to remove the self-images, because even the desire to be admired usually comes from some kind of self-rejection. Do you see what I
Mhm.
mean? I spoke about self-rejection and egotistic purposes as if they're different things, but they're one and the same thing. So a lot of it is understanding that and understanding the dynamics of your own character, which of course then becomes the framework, a really observed character that to create stage and screen characters
Yes,
truthfully. But the most simple
absolutely.
thing to do is when you've got an audition, is when you, the first thing I teach actors to do when they get an audition is to renounce it,
And what do you mean renounce it?
to let go of the attachment to getting the job.
Okay.
So to just imagine,
I
okay,
mean, easier said than done, but
oh,
yeah,
much
I get
easier
it.
said than
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
If it was this easy, everyone would be enlightened.
Right.
Disemburdened.
Right.
Enlightenment means
Right.
disemburdened, right? But then what's the burden? It's the burden of all the negative self-images and the egotistic attachments and all of that. So the simplest way around this is to learn how to program a purpose for the audition. So, the best chance you've got of being a successful actor is being good at auditioning and self-tapes. That is the inroad into the industry, is the quality of
Well,
the
assuming
auditions
you're
you put
getting
in.
auditions.
Well, assuming you're getting them in the first place,
Yes, exactly. Part of
that's
a
another.
catch-22. Yeah,
Yeah, well, that I don't really deal with that part. I deal
I
with
do.
the. All right, exactly. Well, that's why we're talking. Yeah,
Right.
this is more
Yeah.
about sort of the nuts and bolts of
Yeah.
acting.
Yeah.
But when you get the audition, the first thing I would do is renounce it and just imagine that, that it's already been cast to the producer's girlfriend, but they have to go through a casting process to please the financiers. So it shows some self tapes that they put before they chose the producer's girlfriend.
Right.
And so you renounce it. So you let go of the attachment straight away, right? Then you're free to just play.
Yeah.
And now the purpose comes to be, I want to do my best and enjoy my time creating the thing. That's how you're going to act well, not by
Yeah.
wanting to be liked, not by wanting to be admired, not by wanting to fail, but by
Not by
just
wanting to
simply
do it right.
not by wanting to
Because
do it
this,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
one.
That is a huge one. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the need to be right, it really does get in people's way. I say to my students, well, what's worse, wanting to be right, or, well, having a fear of failure or failing? What's worse? And of course, is having a
The
fear of failing.
fear. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
worst
For
thing.
sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, so to get all those purposes out of the way, the simple way is to say, tomorrow, when I go to the audition or when I sit down to create this self-tape, I'm going to relax, come into the present and enjoy it. And start thinking about that. Start thinking about the creative process. Remember, Stanislavsky said a great actor loves the art in themselves and not just themselves in art.
Hmm.
That's, a lot of actors, they never even talk about acting. They just go on about the industry, my next job, what this casting director said,
Right.
what it's all about the industry. And you hear they don't actually talk about the art of acting. The real love, isn't it? That's usually
Yeah.
what gets people going is they get the
Right.
bug. They loved acting itself.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, when I go to the audition, I'm going to relax and you create a picture and imagine how you're going to feel. Come into the present. That's really important, and enjoy it. And then you've got the best chance of delivering the best self tape because you're not full of all these fears, doubts, attachments, etc., and claims.
Yeah.
And then you submit and you just surrender it. What's for me won't go by me. You send it out to the universe and hope it lands, but you let
Yeah.
go of it.
There's a lot of, I think, training in that, like training yourself to believe what you're saying, right? That
Yes.
all of that. So, and I get it, and I can see definitely how that's useful. I do something similar, but it's not quite the same. There are two things, like your physiological response to excitement and nervousness is the same. Your mouth will go dry, you'll get butterflies in your stomach, your senses are heightened, all of these things. So you can often just trick yourself by taking a stance of someone who's excited, which is open. Take that stance and say, I am so excited about having fun on this
It's
audition. So that's one thing. Instead of,
yeah,
because so many times we get into the mindset of like, I'm so nervous. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. Oh my God, I'm going to throw up. Oh my God. And and it's like this self perpetuating thing.
yes,
And the other thing that I think, and this maybe goes more in line with what you were saying, is to have a couple of objectives. Like, one, I'm just going to go and have fun, you know. Two, I'm going to try and discover something new about this character in my play. So to have like two objectives, something that you're thinking about in terms of the discovery, the this, the that, and instead of like setting yourself up for, oh God, I hope I do it the way they expect me to do it, you know?
yeah. That's it. You're absolutely right. It's wanting to enjoy your time, find out, and do your best. That's
Yeah.
a professional, you know? That's what makes you a professional is you're able to do that. And when you don't get the job, and you ask any actor, there's going to be more jobs you don't get than you do get. You need
Yes.
to find a way to deal with that and to pick yourself up and to brush yourself down and get on with it. But the key to it is not getting attached in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
The meaning of spiritual discipline means to retain balance and touch nothing. That's the meaning of spiritual discipline. And there you stay free. And it's really important that an actor stays free. You know, that they have a means of going home to themselves. This is meditation and letting go of everything. Their own character, the character's character, and just coming back to pure being, cleaning the slate, you know, that is really important for actors to have a means of doing that, because all this stuff otherwise just gets picked up as baggage and carried around to the next gig, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So there was one thing. So I know what I wanted to ask. So this was something that always kind of confounded me, especially because I went to acting school back when Stanislavsky was the only thing that they were really teaching, right? So long time ago. And there is the magical what if and if I were and creating this backstory and you know without first going through certain things. Like, I think in a sense, you kind of have to work your way backwards. What are the biggest things about this character, the most obvious things, and keep asking questions to get to the inside. And when I was a young woman, I would do it the other way. And I'm sure that this is what you mean, but it used to confuse me to like when my instructor would say, like, what did your character have for breakfast? Well, like, I don't know. I had oatmeal. Maybe that'll work, you know? And and it's like getting like so I think that this can be something that can be confusing for actors, right? They're thinking in the minutia before they're thinking like,
The big
is
thought.
this
Yeah.
the big thoughts? Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
for that, imagine that you've got a photo album for the character.
Yeah.
For any character you create, there's a photo album. And on the first pages, they're full, headshot size, 10 by 8
Yeah.
photos. Right? They're the big thoughts. They're the things like the character's self image,
Yeah.
the character's, what we call the character's life situation.
Mm.
So what's the life situation of the character? How do you program a self-image? You have to create a life situation. So the life situation is a period or an experience of tense imprinting. And imprinting is a term that I borrowed from zoology,
Mm.
because certain thought, for a chick,
Right.
when it's first hatched, the first moving object that a baby chicken sees is mother, right, in nature. Now, if you were to remove that chicken and hatch it next to a remote controlled fire engine, a mini fire engine, that would take it as to be mother, and it would follow it around the room. It would think it's mother, the remote controlled fire engine. We also have this imprinting mechanism, and it's where some of these um, big thoughts get imprinted in the mind. So when we create the character's self-image, so for example, with Valmont, a lovesick fool, for the actor, we created a whole story that he created in active imagination about basically stalking this girl and writing love poetry and pulling flower petals. She loves me not, and following home from school, and then following her where she's eloped with a boy into a park, climbing the wall and edging himself along the branch and spying on them. And then the branch breaks and he
Mm.
comes falling down and they both laugh at him and he runs off absolutely
Mortified.
humiliated and goes home and locks his room. So now how do you make I'm a lovesick fool? You have to create it in pictures. So you create a life situation. Now, how do you get good at this? The actors start to name their own self images and start to find the life situations of how these thoughts got into their minds in the first place, which is a tremendously liberating experience for the actor because they begin to understand themselves, the logic of their own character, what their subconscious drives are, why they want the things they want, what they're trying to compensate for. I teach that the human psyche is an energy system seeks naturally to come into balance. But very often the things we do to try and bring it into balance just make further imbalance. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to create
Y-
the character's life situation.
So
Uh,
can I just sort of make sure I've understood this? So hopefully the listeners and the watchers will understand this as well. So what you would do is take the most obvious thing in Valmont that would be his vanity, right? And then you go to the opposite with, and what is vanity? What does vanity want? I'll explore that. And then
what's
you
the
take it
purposes of vanity? Yeah, it's to be held in awe. He wants to be held in awe. It's
to
basically
be,
design.
okay.
He wants all women to want him, and he wants
Yes.
all men to envy him.
And so then you would get to that point and then go, what is the opposite of that? To be ridiculed, to be humiliated, to be an object of scorn, to be what nobody wants.
Exactly.
And that is the birth of this vanity.
Exactly that. It's how did this thought get into the character's mind in
Yeah.
the first place is the question
Yeah.
that leads you to discovering or invent. You have to invent. Sometimes in a play, the playwright does put it for you. I have found examples of that.
Yes.
But usually, an actor or a director is like a detective turning up at the scene of the crime or receiving the play. The playwright's giving you a limited amount of information, and from that, you have to create a totality. You have to be able to read behind the lines and make a totality, a story that's behind it that truthifies the character. That's the job of
Yes.
the actor, is to create the character truthfully. Then, they'll fulfill the function, and then the meaning of the play will be delivered to the audience. I often ask actors in the intro, I say, what was the purpose of an actor? And they say, to tell a story. And I said, well, no, that's the purpose of a writer or a director. What's the purpose of an actor? And they're like, we picked up this cliche to tell a story because someone once said it in a drama
Right.
class.
Yeah.
It's very simple. It's to create a character, but you have to create a character that serves the story. And the spiritual psychology of acting shows you how to do it properly. So you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel or anything like that.
So I'm curious, how long would it take to assimilate the spiritual psychology of acting?
Right. So I offer, so the whole course can be studied. The whole course is comprised of 6 modules. And so I sort of run through what they are. The first one is called the Elements of Great Acting. So that consists of 12 2.5-hour classes. And that we go into all the elements of great acting and the qualities of a great actor, attention, imagination, freeing the body of tensions, complex creation.
So can I ask you, is this an online course or is
So the
this
whole
a
thing is offered as a hybrid of recorded content, and so I don't have to spend the rest of my life repeating the same things
lecturing,
over
lecturing,
and over
lecturing?
again.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
right.
so it's all perfectly good in the recording. And then what we do is that people who've bought the course, they come on with me on a live session online once a month where I answer their questions. We do technique exercises together. And most importantly, I get to look at their work individually and give them feedback and guidance.
Ah,
So
because I mean, without the actual doing of what you are theoretically learning, there is no improvement.
Oh,
So
you
that was
can't
my
learn without
question.
doing.
Right.
Yeah. Every
Yes. Yeah.
class in the recording, every class starts with meditation.
Hmm.
Then there's some spiritual reflection to get us, to remember who we really are, to come out
Yeah.
of all the self images and the ego and all the rest of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
The true being inside, the universal being inside, the universal self, really, that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
really are. And then there's usually in every class, there'll be some theory. So we'll look at the theory of attention or imagination or how complexes work. And then there are 10 elements of great acting. And then practical exercises to learn and understand that element.
And how long do the Zoom sessions go on for?
Oh, so the first module is 12 sessions of 2.5 hours. Then the second module is called Know Yourself, Be Yourself, the Principles of the Human Psyche. And that's
So
where
are
we go
people,
for.
can I ask,
Sure.
are these sold individually as courses,
You
or
can either buy
do
them individually, or if you buy the whole lot together, it's like a third off. Do you see what
okay,
I mean?
that
You
makes
get a
sense.
big
Yeah.
chunk off if you buy
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
course together. Most people buy the whole thing together and pay
Sure.
in installments is how I normally, how we do it. But
Yeah.
people do also
So,
pay up
uh,
front
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and buy the
Yeah.
whole thing. But yeah, but it's
Right.
possible to pay it. It's more affordable by
Right.
installment.
They can check all that out on your website. I don't want to go into that too deeply here,
Right.
but
Okay. But it's 6 modules, and it generally takes people about 2 years to get through them all, to go
that's
through
what I was
all
going to
the
ask. Okay.
training. And then
Yeah.
they also get, I'm doing some live workshops in May. I'm doing one in New York I think it's the 8th to the 11th of May. And then the following week, I'm doing one in Los Angeles. And then that's all in May. That's all on the website under the workshop. And then I'm doing one in Vienna in June
Yeah, you
as
mentioned,
well.
and maybe you'll come to Munich.
And I'd happily come to Munich and do it.
Yeah.
I have done a couple of workshops. I've done Berlin a couple of times, and
Yeah.
Bochum I've done
Yeah.
with Dirk and Leslie
Yeah.
Potcar. I've done a workshop for them earlier last year. So
Well,
yeah, I love traveling and coming and doing a workshop with a fresh group of actors.
yeah. No, it's fascinating stuff. It really is. Really fascinating stuff. And I would love to try it out. It sounds like a lot of fun.
I
So,
think you would
John,
love it, to be honest, Dan. I think you would really take to it. The kind of questions you ask, I can see that you'd really enjoy it.
yeah, it sounds like I would. I mean, I could tell, like, I could talk about this with you forever, and I'm sure that you could talk about it forever.
Oh, it's my
I have
favorite
no
subject.
doubt. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's just so much to it, right? It's
Well,
delving
it,
into the human psyche, and how do you portray that in an authentic way?
brilliant.
So
Well, that's
that's
exactly what it is. And I say to people, what I really teach is the spiritual psychology of human life for actors.
yeah.
Because, you'll see on my website, I've also sort of taught some sort of Grammy winning singers, dancers,
Yeah.
even lawyers and doctors I've trained in the past. Because the
Oh,
second part of the course, the Know Yourself, Be Yourself, that's the laws of spiritually based psychology, of really what I call practical psychology. Um, and then they learn about all the purposes, all the human purposes. There's 180 of those. We go through all of those in one module. And then the other 3 modules are the 10 steps to creating a character. So having learned all the principles of great acting is like, how do you then apply it to a script?
yeah.
And within that, you learn the active embodiment technique. And then you're good to go. And once you've got the knowledge, I say to them, now you've got the rest of your professional life to become an expert. But
Right.
these are the rules of acting. This is what makes good acting. And we see that in the class. It's like, well, when someone does an exercise, why didn't it work? What was getting in the way? And what I found now is
Interesting.
I can
Yeah.
get them to do one single line of Shakespeare, and you can see whatever's getting in their way, you can just get in there and help them sort it out. You just do one single line of Shakespeare.
Wow. Okay. Do you have a favorite that you use?
I do. It's the opening line of Henry V. Oh, for
Ah,
a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. That's
beautiful.
my favorite line. Yeah. Well, it's just so inspiring, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, with that, that's a great note to start to wrap this up. There's one question I ask everybody who comes on to Act Bold. And I don't let you prepare for it. So, what was one time in your life that you acted boldly and something unexpected happened? Could be wonderful. Hopefully, it's wonderful. And it doesn't have to do with acting or anything to do with the industry. Can be
Well,
anything you choose.
well, I can think of lots of examples, but one that definitely does relate to really how I began was, I was 14 and I just moved from Wales, Cardiff in Wales, to a new school in Portsmouth. And we had a weekly new thing. Instead of English one day a week, last week, we had drama with a new drama teacher. And they never had drama in the school before.
Yeah.
And he introduced us to this exercise where we would have to do improvisation. So it was an ongoing improvisation. So you just get up, you start, someone would join in. And I watched for a good few weeks, absolutely mesmerized by this, but way too shy to get up and get involved. And then one day it happened. Um, Something magical happened. I was sitting there, and the story had evolved into a bank, and there was someone there asking for a loan and being refused the loan because they were too scruffy, and there was a queue of people in the bank, and then this impulse came. It shot through me like a bolt of lightning, and the next thing I knew, I was up on my feet with an imaginary stocking over my head and a shotgun. And right, get down on the floor. This is a robbery. And they did as they were told, and I robbed the bank.
Yeah.
And I always think that moment of pure inspiration, of just what I understand now was just a pure impulse coming in the moment. And the
Yeah.
feeling was, I'm not acting, I'm being acted. It's just happening, it's just
Right.
happening perfectly. I would say the whole of the spiritual psychology of acting and my development of that was born that moment, with
That was the
wanting to
germ.
understand. Exactly. Wanting to understand, how do you do this at will?
Yeah.
How do you make this at will? And that's what the spiritual psychology of acting is. And I call it the spiritual psychology of acting, but really it's just the spiritual psychology of acting because there's a spiritual, psychological, and physical part to every person and therefore every character. So all three
Yeah.
levels need to be addressed. But I could quite easily call it the common sense of acting because it's just using the laws of nature. There's nothing artificial. Or to be really precise, it's just acting. It's just how to do your job as an actor properly.
I love that. Well, John, where can people get a hold of you?
So go to the website, spiritualpsychologyofacting.com, John
Okay.
Osborne Hughes, and you'll see that there's a tab on the homepage. You can book a free online intro seminar. I don't know when you're releasing this, but I'm doing 3 in April, ahead of these workshops in May in New York and LA. And
Okay.
normally when people come on, you're offered a special deal where you can, get really good value for money. And then we take it from there. But people are really welcome to come to the online intro and hear all about it for yourself. And then we can take it from there.
That sounds good. John, thank you so, so, so much. This has been so interesting. Fascinating stuff, really. Um, that's it, folks. Let us both know in the comments what you found most interesting about this episode. If you've ever heard of the spiritual psychology of acting, if not, if you're going to check into it, I hope you are. Sounds like there is a lot that is really, really helpful to understanding character creation and making yourself a better actor. So, with that, you all stay your bold and beautiful selves, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.